Wednesday in Weeksville by Dr. Edward Mapp. Andrew watched thoughtfully as his father got into the long black coat, the calico overshirt, and the light striped pantaloons he wore as a coach driver. It was wonderful to have such a tall, handsome black man as Enoch Sampson as one's father. He was proud too. Taking only the long black whip with him to work, Andrew did wish that someday, even once, his father would decide to bring the carbine gun on his runs. It hung over the mantelpiece and seemed never to be used. As large as the gun was, Andrew thought he would soon be big enough to handle it himself. At 11 years old, with long legs like his father, he looked more like 13. Enoch Sampson often said in jest that he had seen muskets that were smaller than his carbine. He used to joke with Mamie, his wife, about it, asking whether she had brought the gun north with her to kill unfriendly whites. They were a young couple to have an 11-year-old son. They were independent and hard-working. He was wiry and lean, a true son of a Songhai empire in Africa. She statuesque, dark-eyed, wearing her hair combed high upon her head so that she could be as close to Enoch in height as she was to him in spirit. All summer he had been called away on overnight runs, which took him north up to Yonkers. Each time, to Andrew's annoyance, he did not take the carbine along for his protection. This Tuesday evening, before Enoch could reach up for his coachman's whip, Andrew asked, "Aren't you going to take the carbine, Father?" Enoch turned to his son, glancing down into those innocent, dark brown eyes peering up at him. "See here, Andrew, I'll show you how it works. You shoot much farther with this than with a pistol," he told the boy. Enoch explained how the firing mechanism at the breech or rear end explodes a cartridge in the firing chamber, blasting the bullet through the barrel. Andrew was thrilled to be taught about the operation of a gun, and he easily understood why it was so popular with both sides in the war, which was still going on between the North and the South. Yet the war and the battlefield seemed so far away from Andrew's life, and he knew it. In Brooklyn's Weeksville, 5-year-old Filzy laughed and cradled her finger like a gun and said, "Toot, toot, toot, see me shoot." It seemed natural that Andrew's little sister would like rhymes and poems, since she was named after the black poetess Phyllis Wheatley. Enoch took his silk top hat from Mamie and looked at her and the two children. Outside, Spencer Reed, a friend and cartman, was waiting nervously for Enoch to finish his endless farewells. An evening mist had settled over the land, but tomorrow would probably be a fine day in July. "Where are you headed, Enoch?" Mamie wanted to know. "To Hamilton's Ferry, and then over to Canal Street, where I must pick up the coach which has been repaired." "Did Reed say whether they were still rioting?" He answered Mamie, "I think so, yes." A mob of rioting whites had set fire to a tobacco factory in downtown Manhattan, which employed many blacks. They're angry over being drafted to fight a war they say is just to free our black brothers and sisters in bondage down south. Mamie was wrapping cornbread squares and some roast sheep's head in his travel bag and looking at him all the time. He'd taken the carbine down from the mantel and placed it on the table next to the blue and white porcelain urn. He looked very bold and brave standing there in his stout calfskin boots. Mamie, you must not worry, though. I don't think the rioting will be carried over the river from Manhattan to Brooklyn. I'm not worried, Enoch. Truly, I'm not. That's my girl. If you want some adult company, go over to Bethel this evening. The ABDE, Abyssinia Benevolent Daughters of Esther Association, a self-help group of black ladies, will be having a meeting and a social. No, I won't go to the church unless there's trouble. Besides, I couldn't leave the children. Enoch knew that there was no love lost between Mamie and the ladies because too many of them would mock his wife about her poor beginnings as a house servant from the South, one of the lucky ones who had escaped servitude. Some even boasted of their free and easy life, part fact, part fiction, when they remembered their days in the West Indies before coming to New York. Enoch put his arm around his wife, kissed her goodbye, while scooping up Philzy in his right arm. After rubbing Andrew's head playfully, he opened the door. Spencer Reed, who'd already mounted his horse. "Come on, man, it's late, man, hurry!" Sounds of the horses snorting and stomping against cobblestone could be heard within the wooden frame house. "Remember, Mamie, I'll try to send you word by one of the young messengers or oyster men if the whites are still burning and looting on the Fulton side of the ferry. But I don't think they'll cross the river. If they do, our black pickets will blow them out from their red flannel undershirts." Enoch was now atop of his horse. The two men rode up Hunterfly Road. In another moment, they would reach the intersection of Crimple Bush Road and then be out of sight. Mamie stood in front of the house, watching after them, the gentle evening breeze blowing through the puffed sleeves of her blouse. Then she went inside, closing the door behind her. Philzy asked, "Mama, why do bad white men wear red flannel underwear?" "Philzy, that was your father's way of talking. Well, they must be very hot for them in the summer." Andrew said, "Don't you know how to be quiet, Philzy?" He watched the concern written on his mother's face. Yet, he could not find the words to tell her that he was old enough to help her if the draft riots came to Weeksville. "Bedtime, Philzy," Mother said quietly. Philzy began her usual delays. "I can't go to sleep," she moaned. "Why not?" "You didn't read us a Bible story yet." Samson's owned a large Bible in which was entered births, deaths, and marriages of each member of their family. The children looked forward to hearing Mother and Father would take turns at reading from it. This weekly event usually took place on Saturday night, after which the family enjoyed some of Mamie's homemade ice cream. "Not tonight, honey. It's a bit late. Besides, this is Tuesday, Not Saturday. Go straight to bed now, Philsey, Mamie said firmly. No fooling around. Brother and sister shared the same attic room under the roof, where their mother's natural dyes used on fabric could be smelled. On nights when the moon shined brightly, they could see the shadow of her quilting's framed outlines on the attic wall. Two children undressed quickly. They put their night clothes on with like speed. Andrew often wore his nightshirt wrong side out, a mistake that never seemed to bother him. Although he was the older child, he seemed to delight in matching the right button with the wrong hole. Everything else thereby going zigzag. Mother tucked the sides of their sheets under the bed. Her hands had a fresh, towely scent from the candle dipping she had done that afternoon. Andrew smelled it when he kissed him good night. Philsey spoke the little prayer she had put to memory. In my bed I lie, Heavenly Father, hear me cry. And then she mumbled the rest in her cute little way, the long list usually ending with, God bless all the people of Weeksville, and the folks of nearby Carlsville too, Lord. Then Andrew asked, Mama, are the draft riders coming here? No. Papa says our black men have armed themselves and are patrolling Weeksville day and night during these troubled times, and if a stray mob should find it, won't even get as far as the Brooklyn Bridge Street. Philsey had fallen asleep while the two were talked in whisper. You're not afraid, are you, son? No, Mama. Are you? Certainly not, Andrew. The rioters do come. Wake me, Mama. I'll take care of them. Of course, Andrew. Mama tiptoed down the wooden stairs. The light from the green kerosene lamp she'd carried highlighted her brown complexion, giving it a golden hue. Andrew listened sharply until Mama's footsteps could no longer be heard. He thought to himself, and indeed, what thoughts they were. Tonight, there were no peals of laughter coming from the downstairs living room as his father welcomed friends. Black men from either Weeksville branch of the African Civilization Society or the Colored People's Association of the City of Brooklyn and Kings County, or from the Prince Hall Lodge of Masons. The bright moon seemed to be doing strange things with the skylight above. Andrew would make out shapes and forms. Had the rioters broken down the white picket fence surrounding his home? Had they trampled his mother's vegetable garden outside? Had they silently climbed his favorite peach tree, swinging from side to side of the house without shaking the wooden rafters? Was that really moonlight outside flickering? Or torches soon to be putting their home aflame? He could almost smell the smoke. Once in bed, Andrew would usually fall asleep the minute his head hit the pillow. This was not the case tonight. He felt himself grow warm with fear. But now this had nothing he could do. He could not go to sleep. It was Wednesday, Weeksville, July 15th, 1863. Andrew Sampson opened his eyes early, just in time to see the sun rising and barely touching the tops of the houses on the other side of Hunter Fly Road. Mamie had already returned from a trip to the community well, where she drew water. The village lay in a heat of haze. As she walked towards the house, she felt the warmth of the morning sun. She had heard her neighbors, who were unable to sleep, talking outside their homes until after midnight, probably turning their faces hopefully towards the scarce breezes. Mamie looked around her garden thinking how poorly it was doing. The tomatoes and the corn were not ripe, the peas and beans were dying on the vine. Then she looked off towards Crow Hill, wondering if an attack would come from that direction. She wondered whether Enoch would return by nightfall. She wondered whether he had any late news about the riots. Not even when they burned the orphan home for the colored children did word of the crime reach Brooklyn until the day following, when a white washer rode into Weeksville looking for work. He told how the firemen were attacked as they tried to put out the fire. Mamie began to worry, but she did not want the children to be afraid. She talked to them as they ate a hearty breakfast. She moved quickly from fire to table, toting dishes of hominy grits and ham, hand-painted pitchers filled with fresh milk. The children were laughing and talking. Philzy kept saying, "Bodinky!" over and over again. It was one of her favorite nonsense words. She made Andrew and Mamie almost cry with laughter. Later, Andrew asked if he could take a sweet potato pie to Grandma Simpson, who lived at the Zion Home for the Colored Aged. He was surprised when Mamie refused to hear of it. Usually Mamie and Enoch did everything possible to please Granny. Being extra nice to her was their way of making up for not bringing Grandma to live with them after Grandpa had died, Andrew thought. He said, "Grandma will be disappointed. You know how she loves a sweet potato pie to go with her chicory at night. She can send one of the night porters at the home to fetch it," Mamie said. Billsy spoke suddenly. "Bodinky! Why don't you ask Grandma to live here? Then no one would have to take her anything." "Hush, Billsy. Don't you know to be quiet?" Andrew said harshly. "I can say whatever I want. Can I, Mama? I'm no slave. Slavery ended in New York in 1827, didn't it?" Philzy would overhear important facts spoken by the grown-ups and select just the right time to recall them. Maybe try to explain that it was Grandma's wish to live at the Zion home so she could be near her many old friends who were around her age. "Everybody knows that," Andrew said to Philzy. "Can the three of us take her the pie?" "Then, Mama." "No, we are going to stay close to home today." Mama tried opening her mouth to explain further, but no sound came out. Andrew understood. "I wish I could think of what to do. There must be something. There must be. Being a child can be so hard at times." Cato Van stopped at the Sampson's home after lunch. He was a messenger during the summer when he was not attending Erasmus Hall. Cato knew his way around Brooklyn's roads, hills, byways better than most people of Weeksville. Black people were not allowed aboard the public stage coaches in Brooklyn, although a black man like Enoch Sanderson could drive a small coach for a private employer. Coming up from the ferry today, Cato had been lucky. He was invited to sit up on the box alongside a friendly white driver. Cato asked Mamie to step outside into the garden. She closed the door of the house. There was a strong wind now, and the sun was not as warm as it had been. Andrew and Filzy, who had remained inside the house, pressed their faces against the window. As Andrew talked to Mother, the children noticed she seemed worried, close to tears. Mr. Simpson said to tell you not to worry, although the rioters are at it again. They asked and attacked a black brother and set him on fire by the Seaman's house in Manhattan. Even women and children were armed with sticks against the blacks. The sheriff is calling for volunteers to help the police. They should be able to stop the rioters soon, Miss Simpson. I hope so, Cato. Where are they going next? Well, I'm delivering a bottle of Constitution water and life serve to Mrs. Eudox Hicks down the road. She has an ailing kidney. On the way back, I will have to leave some flowers at the Citizens Union Cemetery. I can drop by you again if you wish, Mrs. Sampson. No, thanks. Thank you very much, Cato. We're safe here. Mr. Sampson thinks you'd better go over to the colored schoolhouse number 2. Many of the Weeksville women and children will be staying there tonight. You'll be safer, ma'am. We will not be driven out of our homes, Cato Van. Then try not to worry, he said quietly. By now, the children had joined their mother, unable to stay inside any longer. Cato Van! What are you doing here? Andrew said. It's lucky you didn't get pelted with rocks, or worse, get your skull broken like Reed read about in the Brooklyn Eagle the other day. Maybe shouts. Now, you not going to talk to Cato Van like that. Have you taken leave of your senses? I'm 11 years old. Doesn't that give me leave to know what's happening? Your father sent me a message for you and your mother, Andrew. Then to Mrs. Sampson. I'm on my way now. Remember what I said. The 3 Sampsons looked after Cato Van as he quickly made his way down Hunterfly Road. Filzy yelling, Bull Dinky! Bull Dinky! They waved until he disappeared. Mamie said, How about taking a walk with me? Where to? They asked. To our Sunday places, replied Mamie. Sometimes on Sunday the boy walked with his parents and sister to sit a while at the edge of a distant pond near the Lefferts' homestead. The homestead was a favorite landmark to the people of Weeksville. Before getting his freedom and founding Weeksville Community in 1838, James Weeks had been a slave of the Lefferts. Maybe put on her shawl, which was a gift last Christmas from Enoch's mother. She was always weaving things. The 3 set off down the road, humming an old spiritual just as if it was Sunday and nothing was wrong. They climbed the top of Crow Hill. How far can we see from here, Mama? Filzy asked. 2 or 3 miles, I guess. The children saw the smoke as soon as Mamie did. This was not July 4th, An Independence Day of Black Americans was not celebrated but threatened. Mamie tried to decide where the flames were coming from. The red glare of the fire lit up the sky. The smoke spiraled like out of a giant chimney. The fire seemed to come from granaries and storehouses down by the Atlantic Basin dock. Must be, Mamie thought, since most of the workers were black there. Is it a big fire of 1848, Mama? Phyllis wanted to know. Her parents had often talked about the big Brooklyn fire. Let me see, let me see. It was hard for small children to see clearly from this distance. Enoch would have lifted Flimsy, but she was too heavy for Mamie to do easily. We must be turning back to the house, Mamie spoke. Are the rioters on their way? Andrew asked. Question made Mamie frown and look at him. She made no reply. When they got back to the house, Andrew wondered if they should go over to the school or to Grandma at the home. I thought you'd want to protect our home and property until your father got back. Mamie's trick worked. You're right, Mama. We must stay here, Andrew said. Bull Dinky! Shouted Philsy with glee. It seemed to Mamie that staying in their home or near it was certainly the better thing to do. Grandmother Sampson was not alone at the Zion home, so she need not worry about her. Fortunately, their home was not the first one on Hunterfly Road. If trouble did come, they would not be in the place of first and greatest danger. Children would be safer here. Then, too, Enoch might return earlier than expected. In case he did not, Mamie had a plan that might work. Andrew, you must be brave and help your mother by doing just what she says. Yes, Mama. Would you be afraid to fire Papa's carbine if necessary? No, Mama. Remember, I told you I could take care of the rioters, the 11-year-old boy said. Mamie smiled knowingly. A mother's special feeling of pride filled her being. She went over to the mantelpiece, moved the decanter and bowl aside, and picked up the large gun. It was beginning to get dark inside the living room. She lit the green kerosene lamp. Oh, there is no ammunition for the gun. I know where Papa keeps the bullets, Andrew said. He fetched them. Mamie kept warning Philsy to stay away from the carbine and the bullets. Once Mamie loaded the carbine, Philsy stared at the deadly gun. This was one time she had nothing funny nor foolish to say. The next thing Mamie did was to use a garden hoe to knock out one small section of the living room window. With help from Andrew, she propped the barrel of the loaded gun through the window. Then she dragged over an orange crate next to it for Andrew to sit. Hardly a word was spoken during these preparations, neither by Mamie nor the children. Philsy, seeing Mamie steady and the sight of the gun, screamed, 1, 2, 3, aim, fire! Hush! Philsy scolded Mamie. You must be very quiet." She quickly took a dry corn cob from the bin. With a bit of clean cloth, she made a makeshift doll for Filzy. The girl sat in the corner and began to play. Sweet and contently, she whispered to the doll, "Bill Dinky!" Maybe began to explain her plan to Andrew. The bond and sense of communion between them was never greater than now. Listen carefully to what I have to say. Yes, Mama. I'm going to go outside alone. I will walk up and down the road. And what will I do, Mama? The rioters come. I will signal you. At that moment, maybe thought of Filzy's favorite nonsense word. Yes, that's it. I'll yell "Bull-dinky" quite loudly. You must not touch the carbine until you hear "Bull-dinky." Now, sit on the crate by the window. Keep your eyes open and above all, listen for "Bull-dinky." Maybe put on a shawl. All around her shoulders, she wrapped her hand around a brass knob, opened the door, and went outside. That's how she wanted it to be. Looking out, keeping watch, Andrew lowered his eyes now and then. Once he noticed that his overalls were dirty and there was a big tear in a leg. Maybe he didn't have enough time to mend it today. He had no idea what to do to help his mother other than what she asked. I'm going to stay up all night, thought Andrew, smiling. The underground work at the Bridge Street Church couldn't be more exciting than this. Runaway slaves from the South were fed, housed for the night there, and moved over to Canada in the morning. Sitting there on the rough crate must be a lot easier than sleeping on the hard basement floor of the church. Some of the fugitives had carved figures into the stone of the floor while waiting for the morning. What can I do to pass time? Andrew wondered. He looked at Filzy, who had fallen asleep holding her corn cob doll close to her body. Any time soon now she'd be frightened out of her sleep by the loud roar of the carbine gun, which Andrew hoped hit a target. As if she needed an excuse to stay outside, Mamie began to beat a Brussels carpet which was hung on a line by the side of the house. Next, she dragged a wheelbarrow along the road, pretending to be busy, picking up leaves, weeds, stray corn husks. As she had noticed earlier in the morning, the garden needed work. But the vegetables would not gain much from Mamie's walking up and down, watching the road and looking towards the window where Andrew waited. It seemed natural at one point for Mamie to wonder if her plan had really been necessary. The sun had fallen below the horizon, and it was hard to see chores she was pretending to do. Twilight usually meant time to start supper. This time, it meant danger. The few other houses on the road were empty and dark now. Their occupants had gone either to the school or to the church. It would soon be too dark to see as far as the intersection of Hunterfly and Crimplebush roads. Mamie decided to sing so that Andrew would hear and not feel alone. The words of "Climb Jacob's Ladder" echoed in all directions. Still, there was no sign of fire, smoke, noise, or danger of any sort. The rioters had probably taken the ferry and returned to Manhattan after putting their torches to what surely must have been the grain elevators. Feeling calm, safe once more, Amy glanced around again and saw 4 white men in the distance. They were coming up rapidly Hunterfly Road, seemingly headed straight for her. They must have been drawn towards the undarkened house on the road, in much of the way moths are drawn to flame. Where did they come from so suddenly? I was watching the whole time, she mumbled to herself. There are only 4 men. There could be more. If it is possible to be grateful for something under these circumstances, maybe. Was confused. Coming past the rows of silent houses, they move like a confused, bewildered mob scurrying for safety. Was it possible that only our black patrols were chasing them? Small hope of that. It was she who must scurry for safety. It would be a while before she could grasp the full terror of what was going to happen next. Not sure they'd seen her. She was shaking inside. As she stopped to think, turning around, she risked facing them for a second as they drew nearer. Then she pushed aside the wheelbarrow, started to run for the house. The sound of danger left her wings. She ran as fast as she could before not following the steady course just along her flight that took her from the rioters. They were quite a band of rogues. The tallest of the 4 seemed to be the leader. He was shouting, "There are 2 things I can smell a mile away. One's a skunk and the other is a black coon." As Andrew sat by the window watching, fear grew over him until it turned into a frenzy. Mamie shouted, "Bull Dinky! Bull Dinky!" as planned. Before tripping on several of Andrew's marbles that were strewn on the ground. Rising quickly, she screamed, "Bull Dinky!" once more. Just then, she was hit by a large rock thrown by one of the men. As she dropped to the dirt, her shawl fell off. Mamie felt she had come to the end of her strength. It was useless to try to go on. As she laid on the ground, looking at the earth, holding her breath, she thought, Andrew and Filsey will be murdered. The house will be burned. Something within her, it can't be the end of the road. Not for people like us. It can't. Black people have the spirit and will to survive and make the world better. The tall white man stood near the front gate. The 3 others were a little behind him, left and to the right. Their heavy boots made sounds on the cobblestone, which could be heard inside the house. Someone yelled, "Batter down the picket fence. See if she's dead." Mother had been hurt, maybe dead. Andrew's eyes clouded as he thought about it. How could Grandma Simpson have been so wrong? Bless those who persecute us, he wondered. A little rough house. Fighting was one thing, but burning and murdering innocent women and children was quite another. Andrew had barely in firing position when he heard, "Break into the house and see if it's empty," one of the 2 men called out. Their leader had moved forward. Frozen with fear, Andrew ducked behind the window. The boy needed to make up his mind. If you've got a mind to shoot, he thought to himself, shoot, now. He knew if he didn't, he'd never forgive himself. The tall white man was in its line of fire. The barrel of the gun shook. By this time, Andrew had come to know the meaning of fear. With a thumping heart, he pulled the trigger. Flimsy woke up, started to scream. The roar of the gun frightened her. Other than the far rocks and torches, the four men were not harmed. Sensibly agreeing that they were no match for a carbine, they beat a swift retreat up the road from whence they came. What they did not know was that the gun was even older than the hands that fired it. Once the rioters left, Andrew hurried outside with Filsy trailing behind, tears rolling down his cheeks. They found their mother lying where she'd fallen. A few minutes ago, she would have been mistaken for dead. Now, her eyes began to flutter, and she started to move again. With Filsy helping, he dragged Mama through the door and slammed it shut behind them. Will Mama be all right? Filsy wanted to know. All Andrew knew was she was still alive. They covered her with a warm blanket. She was beginning to talk to them when there was a loud rap on the door. It must be the rioters back with their own guns to finish the three of them. Then they heard the ever so welcoming voice of Enoch calling, Mamie, Mamie, where are you? Oh, I'm coming, Papa. I'm coming, cried Andrew. Enoch had returned safe and sound. Soon maybe Andrew and Filsy, with her special version, were telling him all about the day's happenings. The morning newspaper might print this story. It's not every day that an 11-year-old boy saves the life of his mother and little sister. Andrew was a hero. Andrew usually arose early on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings to do his special chores. Sometimes Filsy got up to help. Tomorrow morning, the young hero probably would be allowed to sleep late. Bang, 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 he got the gang, Filsy rhymed with glee. Crying was Mamie's way of showing her happiness, but somehow Enoch took a different view. Enoch told Andrew, when I showed you how to use the carbine, I thought you'd promise me never to touch it unless I was here. But, Enoch, I told Andrew. Mamie said. Well, it's all right this time, son, Enoch cut in sheepishly, looking away from the boy. Andrew loved his father, but he wondered if he would ever fully understand him. A great many things Andrew had failed to understand. He was puzzled about the gap that what he heard and saw. The North had spoken loudly against slavery. The voice of abolitionist preacher Henry Ward Beecher had been heard all over this Clover Hill Street. A new ironclad ship named Monitor had been launched right here in Brooklyn. Yet, 4 men had hurled rocks at his mother just because she was black. What did they stand to gain from hurting us? What would become of these men who knew nothing but hate all their lives? Andrew doubted whether even his parents held the answer to these questions, but perhaps someday he would find the answers. The attack soon would be a closed incident, but if someone had asked Andrew to name a time when he and his childhood was left behind, he surely would name July 15th, 1863, that day, Wednesday, in at Weeksville.